strip a table. This is a table from our local Mexican restaurant. It's, as you can see, it's pretty beat up. Lots of scratches, lots of gouges. But it turns out these tables are pretty nice. We're just going to be refinishing the top, because the base is in pretty good shape still. Now, I'll show you what the bottom of these tables looks like. These are Henry Don tables. You can see the label burned into the bottom there, and see the date this was made, which is over here. It's number 1170. We've got another number burned in up there. The date is 1/12/84. That's when they were made. Okay, so these are really nice tables. They've just been abused a little bit, being in restaurants probably since then. So we're going to recover them, refinish them. Table, you want to first put on your, as I call my stripper outfit. I've got my ratty pants and my painting boots, because we're going to use this stripper stuff, which is super nasty. It's today I'm going to be using Super Strip, and be sure to read the directions and the warnings on the back. It's nasty, nasty stuff, because it's going to take off all the stuff on this table. So we're going to pour it into a metal container. Be sure to put the lid back on. And I've got my thick rubber gloves on. And then what you do is you just take it and you paint it on. The instructions say to paint it with the grain. So we're going to do that. We're going to put it on nice and thick. And we're going to use quite a bit of this stuff. We'll cover the whole table. Alright, so I've covered the whole table top with the stripper. I've got the sides too, and you can see it's starting to bubble up there, and we're going to let that sit a bit while I do the other table. Alright, it's been sitting a little bit, and I've got my putty knife. You're supposed to use a plastic putty knife, but I don't like using plastic. I like using metal. I'm going to be really careful so I don't gouge the wood. Let's see how we're doing on this. That's pretty good. Yeah, you can see that stuff just takes the finish right off of that and brings up the wood. And it's not quite getting everything there, so I'm going to put another coat of stripper on this and then try it again. Alright, I put another layer of stripper, and that's coming off pretty nicely. So I'll strip the whole thing, and I like to strip straight into a trash can. You can see the places where I didn't put quite enough stripper on, so I'm going to put some more on there, and I'll let it sit a little bit, and strip it off again with the putty knife. It's been sitting a little bit, and it's coming off a lot better now. I just got some stripper on my wrist, so I had to go rinse that off. That really hurts. But we're doing pretty well. I'm gonna need to get some more stripper on these edges here. It's kind of hard to put on the edges because you want it really thick, but you also don't want it to be dripping off and destroying anything that's underneath it. So I'll put that on there. Yeah, the table's looking pretty good too. The sides, we've got these little indentions here, so I just go through with the edge of the putty knife like that and scrape that off. If it doesn't come off easily, it just means you need some more stripper. So just put that on there, let it sit, and then you can keep going. So these tables are looking pretty good. I don't know what stain they had originally, but we're going to use special walnut Minwax. With Minwax, you want to stir it up really well. Make sure all the stuff on the bottom is done. Now these tables have some pretty deep gouges, and I think it goes all the way through the veneer. So I'm going to put some wood filler in there. But the wood filler I have is white, so I'm going to add a little bit of the special walnut in there. So I've got the two-step wood filler. Used about 16 parts of this to 1 part of this, and I've got it ready to mix up here in my little can. And I'm going to add a little bit of that and mix it up and see how we do. So I've got these gouges here, and I'm going to smush that wood filler in there with my putty knife. And then you want to scrape it off so it's pretty even. A little bit to sand down. We're going to sand all this stuff down. That's looking pretty good. Epoxy wood filler stuff in there and the gouges. We'll see how that does. And I've got my circular sander. I've got an old piece of sandpaper on there to try to get all the little bits of finish that I didn't get off with the putty knife. And once I go around the whole thing with this one, I'll throw that one away and put on a new 180 piece of sandpaper. Paper on here, I'm going to see if I can get some of these scratches out. We're doing pretty good on this. It's starting to look a lot better. I haven't been able to get these gouges completely out, so I'm glad I put some wood filler in there. So now I'm going to do 2 more passes, one against the grain, and then you always want to do your final pass with the grain. with 220, and I'm going to go over it all again with the 220. Wipe off all the sawdust from the sandpaper with a rag. Smooth. So I'm going to get my rag wet, and I'm going to put a nice layer of water all over the table, get it all evenly wet. And what that does is it raises the grain of the wood. The table's all nice and wet. I've done the sides as well. And now I'm going to sand it again. I got it wet because water makes wood swell, and so the grain rises, and you can sand that down and make it super smooth. Now when I do the edges with the electric sander, you have to be really careful around the corners. I'll show you how to do that. You just want to go really quickly around the corners, very lightly. Edge here with the sander, so I'll have to do it by hand. And I'm just going to use some 220 on that. Clean rag and some naphtha, and I'm going to use the naphtha to wipe down the table one more time, get all the sawdust off. And the reason for that is because if we were to wipe it down with water, as we know, that would raise the grain, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to wipe the whole thing down with naphtha, get all the sawdust off, and then we should be in good shape. All nice and sanded. I did my best on these gouges, but you can still see that they're there. I've got the Minwax Special Walnut stain. And remember, you need to stir it up really, really well to get up all the stuff on the bottom. I've got my thin glove on because the stain won't hurt me and it won't eat through it, but I don't want to stain my hand, so I've got a paper towel, and just get some on the paper towel and then start rubbing it into the wood. Last pass, we're going to go with the grain. It looks pretty good. Make sure you get the edges and the corners. Pretty good, done with the staining. Now we gotta let that stain dry, and then it's on to the next step. So the gouges on here, at least they're filled in, they're nice and even, but they leave a pretty dramatic white mark. So I've got a Sharpie, and I'm gonna fill it in a little bit. So I've used the Sharpie on it, and then I used a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a paper towel to lighten it up a little bit, and I think that's about as good as we're going to get. Did this one over here too. Now it's time to put this sanding sealer on. A sanding sealer on the bases because we're not refinishing those, so I've wrapped some plastic around the bases to protect them from the sanding sealer. The sanding sealer, we'll put it in the gun that we hook up to the air compressor. The sanding sealer dry, then we sanded it, then we wiped it down with water, and now we lacquered it, and we're looking pretty good. Let the lacquer dry. Time for another coat. Just can't win. Probably never go right. Right more, I hope it's pretty. here is the finished product. It looks pretty good, I think. You can still see where the gouges are. There are those dark marks. But this is perfectly smooth, and it's a nice hard layer of lacquer. So I think that came out really well. The other table, which didn't have nearly as many scratches, looks fantastic, I think. So that is how you refinish a table.